How can a startup business attract investors? What does it take for an entrepreneur to succeed in these trying times? Or how do you pivot your traditional business into a tech startup?
Welcome to the fourth episode of The Pivot, and today we will answer those questions and more with our special guest, our very first one actually, an entrepreneur, investor, and the brains behind The Pivot, Mr. John Paul Aclan.
Hello everyone. Hello James.
Welcome,
Hello Attorney
welcome,
Bernice.
welcome.
I'm James Deakin.
And I'm attorney Bernice Piñol, and today we are joined by the CEO and founder of the Aclan Group of Companies, who will share with us his insights and experiences as an investor, entrepreneur, and the brains behind The Pivot. So welcome to the show, sir. We're very excited to have you.
Thank you for having me here, Bernice and James.
You're a man of many hats, so to speak. There's the law firm, but there's also the investment side. So you're both an entrepreneur and an investor. So we wanted to pick your brains about certain things. We're very curious about your journey as an investor. Maybe we can start there.
Well, as an investor and as an entrepreneur, it was riddled with failure. You don't achieve success overnight. You just don't wake up in the morning and say, "Oh my God, my business is already okay." I've had 30 failures before I hit one. And when you say failures, you're going to scrape the bottom of the barrel. It is not like, I have a very nice idea. I discovered water, I discovered fire, and boom, everything is okay. It doesn't work that way. You have to scrape the bottom of the barrel. You have to be, you have to allow yourself to learn a lot of things. You're going to be hurt along the way. And the most painful part is that you're going to bring your family with you. If you don't experience those, you can never be an entrepreneur. You can never succeed in this line of work.
That's such a great way to start.
I was
the
just
show,
gonna
right?
say.
Like,
so
really...
what gets you attracted to the self-flagellation? I mean,
Well, like what I
it's
always
not
say,
Easter yet.
It's not Easter. But bottom
30
line,
failures, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. But I'm willing to work 80 hours in order for me not to work for 40.
Right.
I've been an employee myself. I've been through the ranks of the corporate life.
Right.
I've been through different corporations. The biggest thing there is that there are certain personalities, like type A personalities. Entrepreneurs are type A personalities. They don't want to be mandated upon. They're type A.
Right.
And when I was working, I was always, I had a cultural fit issue because you wanted things done on your own.
I see.
Okay,
and you were meant to be a CEO.
You're meant to, sometimes the creative ones, when you have an idea, you just want to ram it through. And when you are working as an employee, you gotta dribble your way. You gotta go from one end to the other. And sometimes for others, they would, God bless them, they're able to do that for 30 years of their life. I wasn't able to do it for 10 years of my life. So basically...
So you were in the corporate world for 10 years? Yes.
12
before
12
you...
to be exact. And I was navigating everything, and I said, okay, on that particular end, what will it take if I do it myself?
Okay.
What will it take for me to do it myself? It was a big jump. It's coming because when you work, there is a certain system around you.
Oh yeah.
When you're doing it yourself, you're building the system for you.
That's where all the risk is, though. But that's where all the reward is.
That's where the rewards, everything that you can possibly have. It's not the time that you're going to actually have, but it's your freedom to create things.
So this is a template you kind of work with. I think you can almost call it a mindset. I mean, like is it fair to say that a person like yourself, venture capitalists or investors, looking at, let's say, 10 businesses expecting 9 to fail, but that one is going to 100x or 50x?
Yes.
So is that what attracted you to the startups?
Yes, and two things. One of the key important facets of it, what attracted me to startups is that I always look at it as an entrepreneur, two specific points, even as an investor. Number one is the profit margins. The profit margins, is looking at it that, okay, if this profit margins, I can get this particular earnings from that. And then the scalability. It's those two factors are the ones that really made me focus on the startups, because when you look at the 10 that you're going to invest in, one will actually hit it, because all the margins of startups are crazy high. crazy high because you can dictate it. No one will tell you that, okay, your margins will only be at this X%, and we're going to build it like this.
Hasn't been invented yet.
Yeah, because basically you are the ones who actually dictate it. Not unless you are one of the blue chips already, you cannot dictate the margins anymore. Because they have other plans in place, like for example, you're one of the big brands. You cannot just simply say, I want to earn 90% out of that particular product. That's impossible because they have other plans for it. You cannot simply do that. So that's the reason why there's a very, very big difference between a startup and that of a normal traditional business. Right. Because in the startup, you're there to define the margins that you're going to make. And plus the fact that you're into something new, something cool, it's going to actually solve a problem.
Right.
So it's how they put it. It's mixing yourself up and trying to really match, what you feel, what you think your purpose in life is, and then doing it yourself. But it's not for everyone. The
So what kind of startups have you invested in, or are you just concerned of the profit margin, or there's a particular sector or kind like fintech maybe? What kind of startups?
All startups I actually invest. All tech is actually high potential for me. Everything that handles tech is high potential for me. Big ticket items, different industries as well. I invest on that. I fall in love not with the business model, but I fall in love on the scalability of the business.
The network effect is a huge part of how you invest. What can you say about the Philippine ecosystem for startups here? I mean, it's fairly new law, and part of the reason the pivot was created to explain this in layman's terms. How friendly is this? Could we eventually see a level playing field that would make us a Silicon Valley of the East?
Well, there are a lot of there's a lot of direction pointing to that, but the problem with the Philippines is capital.
That's right.
Startups will always have an issue on capital unless you unlock that. That's what I always say. Unless you unlock the capital realm.
How do you unlock?
Yeah.
Well,
why is it locked up?
Well, it's locked up. Well,
Yeah.
it's not driven by anything, but because we live in a third world society. That's basically that. We live in an oligarchy. And
so the people who can have the capital are the ones being disrupted.
Of course, and
many ways.
you always protect your turf.
Yes.
It's like how dictators of Africa and the rest of the continents behave. It's just normal. That's
Those are extreme examples of protecting.
You're protecting your turf, and the way to protect your turf is you stop disruptions. The only way for you to actually do that is if you strategically make the world smaller, which right now the world is smaller. I mean, who could have thought that we can talk to somebody 3,000 miles away on the same time zone because of tech?
That's right.
And we cannot do this alone. In the Philippines, we need the United States. We need first world markets. As a firm believer of technology. Not all in Europe is a firm believer of technology, but majority of them are. But you talk about countries and all, you have to be able to actually create some networks in those first world markets. And when I started, that was one of my primary vision and mission, was to really create strategic alliances with the first world market. And you cannot do it alone. You cannot simply say, I'm a Filipino, I'll do this alone, we will be...
Right.
So do you think the ecosystem is friendly enough? Is it supportive? Do you see anything lacking in the law?
Well, what's lacking in the law, which is actually a little vague, is in terms of the Investor Protection Act. And how do you protect investors that actually comes in? Because
how do you? I mean, with 10x and 50x and 100x on the table.
How do you protect that? That's number one. Number two, it's also a mindset of the startup, as entrepreneurs. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you became an entrepreneur because you didn't want anyone breathing down your neck.
Right.
But when you have an investor, he will breathe down your neck.
Yeah.
So it's
they
like
have a
working.
stake in it.
It's like working for someone. And most Filipinos on the entrepreneurial side doesn't want to do that.
Okay.
They can't do that because, well, for one, who are members of the startup community, majority, these are second generation or third generation rich kids who has had everything. They never worked in their entire life. That's why some of the startups are not working.
Because they're not really feeling the pain points.
They don't feel the pain points.
Yeah.
So they usually run into conflict with the investor. Because the investor will say, no, I want this, I want that.
How do you balance that though with your statement earlier that you kind of wanted like freedom and autonomy, right? That's why you left the corporate world, and here you are with a business, and you have investors, right? With kind of like them taking part in how you run your business. So how do you balance that autonomy and that consideration of your investors?
The corporate world, when you work in the corporate world and you reach a certain position, you're like a bibingka.
Okay.
You're being burned on top. You're being burned at the bottom.
Oh.
You're being burned at the sides.
Okay.
You know, you have to really balance everything out.
Right. Okay.
When you're talking about an investor, it's only one person.
Okay.
It's only a group of people.
Oh, right. Okay.
It's not as many
It's
as
just
you-
on the top.
It's
So what is it? It's like a puto bongbong.
it's how they put it. It's just like one direction. You're not being pressured from any direction.
Oh, okay.
All you have to do is
a very
actually,
good point.
yeah, you have to just align with them. You know, really make sure that they know what you're doing.
That's right.
You have to make sure that you're not wasting their money, and you have to establish that particular trust. It's easier compared to when you have to burn with everyone else.
All right. That's exhausting.
This is a great place to segue into, let's say, people who are watching right now who are trying to be, or startups, and then you being the investor.
Yeah.
What are you looking for in presentations? Does it matter, or are you able to see through a lousy presentation that has a good idea?
Yes. Well, majority of the startups and majority of the companies I invest in, they always focus on the idea.
So
Okay.
it's not like, oh,
I
what
don't-
font
I don't-
you have and what your PowerPoint looks
It's not
like.
it's not the model.
Okay.
You don't focus on the business model. I look at profitability and scalability. If your profit margins is beyond 50%, I will
Okay.
invest on you,
Okay.
because you know there's a lot of potential there, which means that in every centavo or in every peso that I put in, there's huge margins to be made.
So if you're going to advise somebody who's, let's say, saying, okay, I want a pitch to an investor now, what would you tell them to focus on the idea 100%, never mind what the
Focus
PowerPoint
on the
looks like?
financials. Focus on the financials. Focus on the numbers. Investors are very, very number driven.
And even if startups can't really, have something tangible in their financials because it's all just projections, right? Like that's okay with you.
Yes, projections are okay as long as it's reasonable.
It's backed up by facts.
That's why I look at it as financials, because when I look at the financials, I always ask about the assumptions. How did you
Okay.
come up with that assumption?
Right.
If the owner doesn't even know how he came up with the assumption, then there's nothing to talk about.
Okay.
Just imagine, I'm going to hit $1 million sales in a year's time.
Right. And what's your
So
basis for
palagay ko
that?
lang.
Yeah, and then when you ask him,
I
okay,
feel
so
it right here.
and not only that, it's not even
In my
that,
gut.
James. It's they just wet their hand and they raise it up like that. I just got
Okay.
1 million.
Okay.
There's a-
It sounded like
You've
a nice
had
round
pitches.
number.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right? It's like, and they just want you to hear that they're going to hit that, but when you ask them
I see.
how,
Right.
they don't even know how.
Right.
And when you ask them, okay, so what's the risk side? What's the downside? I mean, after everything have been said and done, how are you going to screw me? If the person will suddenly say, no, there's no failure here, everything is, I usually move away from that.
Okay.
Because you're not telling me the truth.
Okay.
Because we all know that it will fail one point or the other, and I need to come in again and rescue you.
Right.
So if it's not reality based, then they don't give those projections correctly, then there's something wrong.
As an investor, would you say that you're the shark type? I mean, you've seen Shark Tank,
Yeah.
right? That show. Is it really like that when people come
No.
up to you for pitches and
Shark Tank is a show.
Yeah. So nothing
And
like that at all.
When you invest, investors are
Is
the
that a fact?
friendliest people that you
Oh,
can
okay.
possibly find. You know why we need to be friendly?
Okay.
She'll tell us everything.
Oh.
Is it normally in this space, it's the problem you're trying to solve,
Yeah.
right? In tech startups, that's usually where people come from. With that being the premise, what do you think the startups, the most promising ones, are in the Philippines?
Well, right now, the biggest.
We have a lot of problems to solve. That's what I'm
Yes,
saying.
but it's really bridging the suppliers with the consumers. That's the most promising right now, because consumers right now, this day and age, doesn't
Okay.
even know what they want. So if you can create a product that will enable them to really go back in their own consumer confidence. We call
Okay.
that in economics as consumer confidence, what have you,
Okay.
all of these.
Okay.
If you can teach them how to go back to their old ways, that's the biggest tech idea right there. Like, give you an example. Lazada was nothing before this pandemic. They were already, talk about flash sales sites, 2016, 2015.
Okay.
They were too early in the game. You had so many players, big brands and Sogo and all of these other stuff. And they were all there because they wanted to bring people to the internet. Lazada was also there, but they were like, who are they? There was nothing. Come the pandemic, what happened? They're not bigger than any of them all.
Right. Yeah.
You won't
Yeah.
even see people walking to the mall buying stuff.
Exactly.
And this opens up another avenue, because I think a lot of the reason that Lazada didn't quite take off the way it should have in the beginning was there's this hesitancy as far as like inputting payment details online for the Filipinos.
Right.
We're not quite as savvy as the rest of the world. Like in the US, everything's credit
Fear of
card,
fraud,
Apple Watch,
like,
Pay,
you know.
etc. But
Right.
here, there's still a hesitancy. Wait, baka mawala yun.
Exactly. Or
But
somebody would use
the
it.
pandemic forced that, so
Yeah.
we had no choice. We
Yeah.
Gcashed it, we COD'd it, and now
We evolved.
and now we can't go back.
You can't go back, and you have to go back also in the way you are even buying your grocery items. There, people are now looking for solutions, options.
Well, you had a restaurant, so you had a bricks and mortar
Oh, yeah.
business that didn't do too well. How did you pivot in that? Tell
Well,
us that
basically,
story.
the dine-in sector, when we were actually into that, I had several restaurants and all that.
This was just last year, right?
This was last year, and we were, I had it already before, and it was good and stuff like that. But when the pandemic hit, just imagine we tried to do delivery.
Right.
We tried to, we'll
Like
bring
all the other
like all the
restaurants
other
did.
restaurants. But the problem there is on the restaurant space. How do you deliver Chinese food to somebody and make it so appetizing?
Oh yeah, it's different. It's
impossible.
a different experience.
It doesn't work.
Especially if that was not the initial intention of your business model. You wanted to create an experience, and now, I mean, I think there was a popular ramen place just not far from here that we know about that was just, they wouldn't even allow takeout before.
Yeah.
As in even if you pre-pandemic, if you want to buy it there and take it
They
out,
won't
wouldn't
allow
let
it.
you.
They won't allow it.
Because they couldn't control the experience, but they were forced to pivot.
They had to pivot. They had to create a different model. They had to change the way they did things, and that's something that everybody needed to do. Yeah.
How long did you have that restaurant before the pandemic?
It was 2 years.
2 years, and it was doing well.
It was doing very well. Then we expanded it, and then all of a sudden one day we suddenly said, "Okay, enough is enough. We can't do this."
Right.
So
There's
even
no way.
with the deliveries, it didn't work out.
It didn't work out.
So you pivoted your restaurant into a podcast.
Yeah, and
Here we are.
yes, and then brought some of the
What a
employees on the
transition.
delivery to another business, which is on the medical front, delivering them.
There
Instead of
you
delivering
go.
food, you deliver medicines.
Perfect.
That's what
Perfect.
we call thinking out of the
Yeah.
box. See, it's
Yeah,
like
I want-
you
I
know,
really
other
wanna
people be
hear
thinking
that.
restaurant. I can only pivot into X, Y, Z.
Exactly.
Who said?
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
it's like it's still a business like anything else. It doesn't have to be pivoted into a food delivery business. It could be a podcast, a startup, a medical business, whatever. It's still
Exactly.
just
Back in 2017, there was a group of kids that just graduated from AIM, and they pitched me this particular food business wherein it was very appetizing, and all you have to do is microwave it.
Oh, okay.
That was in 2017. Back in 2017, I said no to it
Okay.
because there's a lot of restaurants. Why the hell will I cook something when I
irrelevant.
can actually buy when I just
Right.
walk a little?
and yes, and the experience was more important. The
Well,
arcana, social.
Exactly, everything.
In fact, even condos and stuff, if you notice, are just kind of, the kitchens are getting smaller and smaller and smaller because eventually I think they're phasing them out.
Right,
phasing
Or
them
the
out.
idea was, you
takeouts.
outsource everything.
That's right.
There's everything.
I mean, and if you think about it, if you remove the emotional connection, there's a whole other argument about celebrating food and the preparation of
Yeah.
food. That's a different argument. If you're just looking at the economic side of it, it really doesn't make sense to put a kitchen in every single apartment in
No,
an SMDC
no,
building
no.
when you could just have that space for other things and
Actually.
outsource.
Yes. That's
Especially with the economies of scale now.
very,
Food
economies
is
of
not.
scale and everything.
So how did you come to grips with like closing down your restaurant and actually pivoting into?
Well, I had to make a painful choice because if I continue trying to save it, you're just going to lose money on it. It's going to be a bigger problem.
Right.
So you might as well shift, and go to another business.
Where do you draw that line? Because that's probably the harder one to figure out. It's like when you're bleeding, when do you stop the bleeding? When do you think, no, this is going to get better, I'm going to heal, pandemic's going to be over, people are
Right.
going to want to eat again. At what point do you say, listen, this is...
Well, for me, I drew the line when I hit the red for 4 straight months, and I would rather use my reserve cash for something else.
Okay.
Because when I go into a business, I usually have capital for 2 years. I don't go into a business with anything less than that.
Okay.
So if I cannot sustain the business for 2 years, I will not go into that business. But now that I had 2 years and there was a lot of uncertainty with the pandemic, I had to shift. Because even if I stay the course the entire time, I'm going to lose every single thing on that particular restaurant. So I love the restaurant business. I like it, but I'm not in love with it, which means that I have to let
can
it
live
go.
without
I
it.
can live without it. I don't care.
So
But
which
the-
business did you pivot into, or what?
Healthcare.
Healthcare.
Because everybody needed healthcare.
How did you come up with that idea?
Well,
Demand, I'm guessing.
the demand was there.
The
but-
obvious demand that was in our
yeah,
face.
the demand was
Yeah.
there, but there were certain instances wherein when I looked at it, I also saw there were certain businesses that were obsolete.
Okay.
Like people were so afraid with the hospitals.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah. So I had to pivot on a different way, on a different scale, on a different business methodology.
Right.
Do you protect yourself from like the lechon manok model, which is like, okay, you got it. It's like, that's a great idea. Healthcare, we all need it. And then every single person next to you has a, you know, a healthcare,
Competition.
like
That's right.
the lechon manok thing or
Yeah.
the shawarma thing when that was a craze.
Well, they can always do all of those things, but that's where creativity will now come in.
Yeah.
How will you be the best amongst everyone else?
execution.
And execution.
So this brings us to Home Lab. Can you tell us more about it and the transition from a restaurant business to a medical one?
Well, we were doing the restaurant business, and I wanted to build my own hospital back in 2019. But during the time, so I was doing a feasibility and all that, so I said, okay, I'll invest on the diagnostic laboratory scene so that I can learn from it. Because before I invest on something, I want to learn from it. I want to first fail on it so that I
Okay.
know what are the pitfalls. Then the pandemic struck, so I got all of my employees from other businesses like the restaurant side, stop cooking and go to delivering medical personnel to the homes.
Right.
And so during that time, we were using social media as an important funnel, and I said, okay, it's now time to create something tech, a vision wherein we'll be able to deliver the service right at the doorstep of people because everybody was at home. And then the government and everyone else was saying the work from home model is the one that's everybody will be capitalizing on.
Yeah.
So when that happened, I had to actually shift and say, okay, if you're at home, then you still need healthcare and doctors to actually check on you. And it ended a lot of mindset and mantras from different consumers. And with that need, I said, okay, then as I built this model, I will put some automation to it one way down the road, but it cannot be now. It has to be, before you go to automation, you got to go manual first.
Okay.
So I had to put some timeline on the manual bit and
Okay.
then go and
Right. Just to make sure that operations is running.
operations is
Okay.
running, getting this thing going. So we started with serving 200, 300 patients in a month. Now we're serving 15,000 patients in a month. And it's actually providing, a lot of our frontliners are risking their lives, yes. But the frontliners are just one part of it. There's the other
Yes,
sides, the
yeah.
other guys that are
The unsung heroes.
the unsung heroes that are behind the scenes that are making everything work.
That's right,
I mean,
yeah.
you have the guys that are in front of the action, but you have the guys that are making sure that the guys in front has the bullets. And it's a total system. So I created a specific system wherein it's going to actually reach my consumers, and I want to deliver the best service to my consumers. And as an investor, as an entrepreneur, that's always my end in mind. Whenever I build business models, I always want to deliver the best product to my consumers no matter what. I will really raise hell on that, because basically I will not put something on the table that my consumers will not pay for.
Okay.
That's the reason why prices are so high, because there's a lot of companies that adds a lot of fat to it
Yes.
because they say that it's cool, it's sexy, because their audience is Wall Street or the stock market and what have you. Your main audience should be your customer. They should be your primary audience. They should be they should be the one to actually give you, all the revenues that you can possibly need, and they are your boss. So you got to follow them. So that's where I really focus on in terms of creating the business model. And everything that I did with my tech startup and with all of my businesses is on the insight of my consumers. When they complain, they provide feedback. I change the model based on their feedback.
Okay.
So, like, how disruptive is this healthcare business that you've gotten into? How disruptive it is to the traditional, and what problems are you solving? Is it cheaper? Is it what problems are you solving for them?
Well, one of the biggest problem in the healthcare space is that we don't have a delivery system. We have a healthcare system, but you don't deliver the healthcare service to your patients.
Always at the hospital.
It's always at the hospital, and at the same time, it's also inefficient in a lot of ways. That's why our mortality rates in this country is pretty high, because primarily people don't really understand how to deliver utmost care, get all of these layers and all that. Of course, there's a lot of companies doing it with hospitals and all these. But what's different from this one is that we made it accessible to each individual. We're opening several branches. Our target is to hit 200 branches. branches in a year's time. We already have 24 right now. We're going to open another 45, which will bring us to around 69 to 70 branches, and we're going to increase it to 200. The reason why I'm increasing it to 200 is that so that I can bring and deliver more of my medical team right at the doorstep of people. So that if you can order your food and even anything on Lazada right now, at the snap of a finger, it will come to you in a day's time or 2 days' time or even how many days' time. I will assure you that when you get you need medical attention, it will get to you within a day's time or even less than that. If you need results from your tests, I'll make sure that you get it within 24 or even 12 hours time.
Does this cover like COVID or other diseases also?
Yes,
So everything.
all diseases. It's like bringing the entire hospital to your doorstep.
Right.
That's
because
my
people
focal
don't
point.
want to go to the hospital right now because of the
don't want.
COVID exposure. So if you kind of like have a heart attack or whatever, people just kind of choose to just stay at home because the exposure is pretty high.
And the problem here is that there's a lot of Filipinos that doesn't want to go to the hospital for two things. Number one is cost.
Yeah.
Cost.
Very expensive. Just imagine you're going to travel, you're going to fall in line, you're going
Wait for hours.
And all that, and at the same time you don't even know the cost.
Yeah.
Our service right now, all of our costs are listed. in the social media space. You can easily take a look at it, Google it, click it, compare. Whatever you do it. We even establish our own app that you can actually order anytime, and you need a doctor, you can have a doctor this afternoon right now or right now if you really need it. You can do same day booking. You can walk into our clinics. You can do a lot of stuff with it. So
and that app is in iOS also.
it's in iOS, it's in Android, it's everywhere.
So it's called Home Lab.
It's called Home Lab. Okay. So it's like konsultahanan. It's like trying to have yourself consulted at home. You need a blood test. You don't have to leave your home. All you have to do is just wait for somebody to ring your doorbell, and they'll come to you and they will get your blood. And then you get the results within 8 to 12 hours.
Like how extensive is the healthcare service? You do, let's say, obviously no surgery. You won't do a surgery at home, but you do, let's say, an intubation or anything like that. Where do you stop the service at? No, you have to go to a hospital now?
Well, if there are in the medical profession, they have protocols that needs to be followed. Like for example, those that really requires and the life of the patient is already at risk, that you need already a hospital setting. Like for example, if you have a heart attack and you really need utmost care in the hospital, everything is complete already there, so you got to run there. You gotta go there. So for us, what we're trying to do is eliminate the ones that you can really do while you're at home, or the ones that you can actually locally place and have people visit and stuff like that, and that's the one that we are focusing to treat. So it eliminates the number of population in the hospital, and it limits the infection exposure, which is very, very important to people right now. So and it makes doctors focus on the patient, because when doctors are in a different arena, they have 50 patients. So what you do is you focus on 50 instead of focusing on one. So you cannot really, your attention will be difficult at that particular end. But when you have one that you're focusing on, you can give utmost care, you can think straight, you can provide the real care that you can possibly give. So that's what we're focusing on. It's really delivering that service.
Well, that's pretty. It's a pretty tricky thing to disrupt. I mean, the whole medical sort of field. There's such a trust that's built up over centuries and generations of doctors are at hospitals, and that's the safest care for me. So, if you're able to disrupt that, how long before? Sorry, attorney, but how long before legal starts getting disrupted in the same way?
For the legal side, people don't look at the legal service as something that is needed day one. They look at it when they already have problems.
Yes,
which is really
the incorrect way to look at it.
It's really an incorrect way to look at it. You need to look at the legal side as your advisors, because you need to ask them questions. Like for example, somebody's bashing you online. You're having an online business. What are you going to do about it? You're going to actually slug it out on your own,
and then call a lawyer.
When it gets involved. There's something wrong with that. You need to already counsel that someone will be talking to you. Plus, there's a lot of regulatory affairs in our country that people don't realize. They don't know the advantages of establishing your own corporations. A lot of the businesses that we have here, they look at it as single proprietor, so that we'll do it ourselves. Simple lang yan.
It's because it's easier to set up, right?
Kami lang magkakamag-anak ang gagawa nito. We will helping. But you don't unlock capital that will increase your scalability. That's why our
Exactly.
businesses are very, very small. They will say, why don't you expand to another province? They say, okay na kami dito. The province is already okay
So
for
easily
us.
contented.
They're contented on that end, but you don't realize that when you build a business, you're not building a business just for your current family. You need to build a business for the next generation, so that your great grandchildren can also inherit your business. So that's the problem. There's no continuity. So, and how do you do that? You need legal advice on that.
In other words, it's a more difficult space to disrupt, probably because you need the relationship with your legal team more than you need to keep this open. It's not just an app. What can I do with this? So it's, you want to have that.
And if you're looking at tech and you're investing on tech, there's a lot of gray areas. So you cannot just do things without consulting your legal,
Can't bootstrap it.
Nuance doesn't work very well on the internet.
How are you going to do it? I'm going to enter a space, and then all of a sudden there's no legal backbone. That's dangerous. That's
Correct.
going to kill your business like that.
I couldn't agree more. Really.
Well, we'll be talking about a whole lot more about that in our next episode as well, which I'm
That's
really
right.
excited about.
That's
But
right.
before we wrap up this episode, I wanted to ask you, what made you pivot into this pivot? Can you explain a little bit more about the podcast to those who have probably watched us for the first time?
Well, look at the entertainment space right now. I mean, and look at how everyone around the world, even Filipinos, are looking for entertainment. They want to learn. How many learning channels are there? All we have right now is Netflix, YouTube, whatever podcast they can possibly get their hands on. TikTok, 9-second, 10-second thing. That's a very, very fun thing to do it. But there's no specific entertainment space where you can actually really learn, and really understand the business side of things, the legal side of things. Everything is entertainment. There's a lot of shows out there. I won't mention it anymore, but they look at I tried to watch them before looking at the pivot. When I watched them, it was pure entertainment.
Okay.
There was no legal solution that the host or the show is ever putting forth. It was all for entertainment. They have two different parties meeting in the middle, trying to do this, trying to do that, and then have the netizens watch it. It's like I was like in Rome, wherein the barbarians are at the gates and they were all killing each other, and the crowd loves it.
Yeah.
This particular on the pivot side, the episodes that you have already run, you already taught people on how to really run a startup. And that's very important, especially in this time right now. There's a lot of people that were laid off from their work.
That's right. Yeah.
What would they do? Our country needs it more than ever, because if you try to look at it, there's a lot of people who resign from their work. I call it the Great Resignation,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
because
And we
they-
talked about this, that other legal talk shows would just address like family relations, crimes and things like that, but not so much on the business aspect of things. So yeah.
if you can talk about people killing each other, why not making money? It's a better topic.
They're
to
making a
actually
lot of money
discuss,
for
right?
that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess social media found a way to monetize outrage and conflict and all that. So it became the template for almost everybody else that wanted to just generate something on a popular platform. But what you're saying is may laman to.
Yeah.
So we're putting laman into it. So just please don't expect it to be entertaining, but I guarantee
No pressure, Tito James.
you'll learn a thing or two.
Yeah.
We'll sneak in those vegetables every single time. But that's pretty much all we have time
Yeah.
for today. Before, of course, we go, I'd like to thank, of course, the people who made this possible. Well, John Paul, of course, thank you very much for not just today, but for coming up with the pivot. Of course, we would never do the pivot on an empty stomach, would we?
We'd like to thank Mama Foods
Of
and
course.
all the delicious food that Chef Carlos came up with.
That is
And
amazing restaurant right there.
It's amazing concept.
It's
with Mama
actually
Lou's.
it's an example of a tech startup.
Exactly,
really,
that's a
with
perfect
their cloud
example.
kitchen, and how they pivoted from a traditional restaurant into kind of like a
A
tech
cloud
startup.
kitchen.
A cloud
First
kitchen,
time I was
that's
today
right.
years
Very
old when I heard
impressive.
that. A cloud kitchen.
Yes.
We're used to putting all of our photos and stuff up into the cloud.
Yeah.
Why not put a bunch of brands into the
What
cloud?
did you have for lunch? What did you have for lunch?
I had the spaghetti and there was a fish with caper sauce.
Right. So they came up with like a box for us,
That
so
And
is-
the
it
idea
was
is having, I guess,
personalized, it was so
in
good.
its simplicity, is having all these different cuisines in one commissary that is rebranded around to different locations. So you can have the burger from this place, the fish from that place, and the fries from this
And
place.
that's the exciting part right there. And
Exactly.
that's what Filipinos need to start
Yeah.
supporting.
Pivot if you must, right? So do you have any last words, let's say, for those who are going through transition, and how they could pivot the way you did?
Well, don't be afraid to change. People are so scared about problems coming their way and all. and they're so in love with their current business model. For me, don't be in love with the business model.
Don't be too attached.
Be in love with the change. Be in love with making money. There's a difference between two. You
Okay.
know.
Then there's of course who you partner up with. Is there the right people to partner up with? What if you partner with the wrong people? This is exactly what we're going to be talking about in our next episode. That's episode 5. So we'll leave it right there till now. I'm James Deakin.
And I'm attorney Bernice
I'd
Piñol.
like to thank our guests
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much, James and Bernice, for
Thank you
having me
very
here.
much.
We'll see you in 7 days. Bye, guys.
Bye.